Greetings and welcome to the Bowling Green First United Methodist Church. We hope that you enjoy what you're about to see, and you can find us on the corner of Broadway and Church Streets at 11 o'clock on Sunday mornings. Or you can find us at bgmethodist.org and on Facebook at Bowling Green First United Methodist Church. As I was first starting kind of looking at the shack and just as a book to read, and was kind of getting somewhat badgered into it, let's say. I won't say by who, but she's sitting on the front row and it's not Debbie. Not that is oddly specific or anything. But as Emily said, not this time. But as I was looking at that, I did what I do when I'm kind of curious about something or I'm being kind of encouraged. I get on the Google thing and I type in a search and I see what comes up and people are saying about it. And what came up was there were many folks that would say, well, of course it's not a perfect book. No book is ever perfect, but it was very helpful in helping me to understand something new about God and to grow deeper in my faith. Those were good. However, the ones that came up first and that were the loudest were the ones that were saying, oh, it's horrible, it's going to lead you into all sorts of bad things. And there were some that would even go as far as say, it's heresy. And knowing where some of those comments were coming from, I'm like, ooh, this must be a good book. So, well, what is it? What would cause such a different reaction? What is so contentious about this that some people would get so upset? And it's taken me a while, but I think I have finally figured out why some people were so upset when it came out. And I think it may be a little bit like this.
Do not arouse the wrath of the great and powerful God. I said come back tomorrow.
If you are really great and powerful, you keep your promises.
Do you presume to criticize the great God? You ungrateful creatures think yourselves lucky that I'm giving you audience tomorrow instead of 20 years from now. Oh. The great God has spoken. Oh, pay no attention to that man behind the curtain. The great God has spoken.
Who are you?
Oh, I am the great and powerful Wizard of Oz.
You are? I don't believe you.
No, I'm afraid it's true. There's no other wizard except me. You humbug! Yes, exactly so. I'm a humbug.
Oh, you're a very bad man.
Oh, no, my dear. I'm a very good man. I'm just a very bad wizard.
I think that's what it is. I think what gets people so riled up is they're afraid of what they're going to find behind the curtain. If they get too far in there, they start looking too far into who God is. They're afraid of what might be back behind on that other side. Are they going to be disappointed, or are they going to be amazed? And so that fear begins to drive a lot of that. And so these curtains get put up, and as one of my seminary professors would say, he would say that we build up this robust theology of God. Now you have to say that with an Irish accent to get the full effect of when he would say that to us. But that's what it is. Sometimes those theologies can be good because they help us to grow, but other times there are things that we put up that act as that curtain between us and God because we are afraid of what's going to be behind there. Are we going to be disappointed or are we going to be amazed? Personally, I think we're going to be amazed by it. But the first step in doing that when we get there, though, is to know that the first step is going to be getting over what we see that's behind there. Because it's not at all going to be what we expect when we get behind that curtain. Because God is not at all, is greater than any of our expectations. And in fact, as we've been following this story of the shack and our main character, Mac, who is working to find healing from not just the most pressing and most present tragedy that he has experienced in his life, but through the many tragedies that he has faced in his life, and he is working to find that healing through there. The first thing he has to do is one of the things that he has to do is he's got to get behind that curtain. And in fact, Papa, who, if you remember from the story, is the representation of God the Father from the Trinity. But Papa is a little bit different. She is a black woman that everyone calls Papa and confuses Mac to no end because it is not at all what he's expecting. And she calls him on it. And in fact, she says to him, to reveal myself to you as a very large white grandfather figure with flowing beard like Gandalf would simply reinforce your religious stereotypes. And this weekend is not about reinforcing your religious stereotypes. In place of stereotypes, you could put robust theologies of God, or you could put curtains. Curtains that separate us from God. It is not at all about reinforcing those things, which is why God appeared to Mac the way that God did. Because it confused him to no end. He struggles with that for a long time. There's one especially great part towards the end of the book, in the movie both, that where God, as Father, appears differently to Mac, and God says, you need to see me this way now. Because it's not at all about reinforcing those things. It's about how is God reaching out to Mac and sharing that love. That love is reaching out to Mac to draw him in even closer. And why is it that God is doing it this way? We look at Psalm 136 this morning, and they kind of begin to understand why God is doing this. Because this psalm starts off, I love this psalm because it has that constant refrain that comes through there. God's faithful love will last forever. It is so key. It's so key to what's going on. And we see at the first part of that psalm, we have this. It says, give thanks to the God of all gods. God's faithful love lasts forever. Give thanks to the only one who makes great wonders. God's faithful love lasts forever. And it continues on recounting, this is what God made. God made the world, the universe that we are a part of. But God is not just the God of those great, amazing creations. Not just of the wonders, the things that are so much larger than we are. God is just not that God. But as we come through to the end of that, it's almost like the psalmist is drilling down to there, because we get down to other places and we get towards the end of it. It says, God is also our God when we are humiliated, when we are hungry, when we are surrounded on all sides by enemies. God's faithful love lasts forever. That even in those times when we are at our very smallest and we are feeling our most insignificant, God is still God, and his love is still with us. Not just in the big times, but also in those small places as well. And this is what Mac was finding out as the story goes. That God doesn't just love in one place, but God loves in all places. And it works because that just is who God is. God is that love that seeks us out. God loves because that's just what God does. And this is where in the book, I think this is probably the trickiest part of the book to read, this discussion that Mac and Papa are beginning to have about the nature of God and how the Trinity works. And Mac is having a hard time with this, but Papa is explaining that this is the way that I work, and that is good for you. That is good for us, that God works in this way, that God works in three persons. And in fact, Papa says this to Mac at one point, says, what's important is this. If I were simply one God and only one person, then you would find yourself in this creation without something wonderful, without something essential even, and I would be utterly other than I am. God is one God, but God is also three persons, and that works because those three persons share in perfect love and perfect communion, a perfect relationship with one another, and that is, God is already experiencing this relationship and this love. That's a natural part of who God is, and that overflows out of God into the rest of creation. That love comes from the very nature of God, of who God is, and into us. Not too much farther than that, the Papa continues and says, love and relationship, all love and relationship is possible for you only because it already exists within me. Within God myself. Love is not the limitation. Love is the flying. I am love. Very basic part of our Christian faith is God is love. And it is there. And how does that work? There are parts of the Trinity we are never going to understand. It's always going to be a mystery to us. That was why when I was in seminary, that was the only time we could really answer that it's a mystery and get away with that answer. Parts of it we're never going to understand. But parts of it like this, we can get. Parts of it like this, where remember that God is love, and that is how those persons of the Trinity relate to each other, so they can both be one God in three persons because they share in that perfect love and that perfect relationship. And more so than that, it overflows out of them and to us. And it's not just one simple thing. It is not something that limits our ability and limits who we are, but it's what strengthens us and gives us the courage and strength to go out and to do and to be those people that we were made in God's image to be. Being created in God's image is to share in, however imperfectly we do it in this world, because we don't always do it very well, but to share in that love that comes directly from God. For Mac and for us, this means something important. First, it means is that God wants to draw us in behind that curtain. That He doesn't want that curtain to separate us from Him. And in fact, that curtain is something that is of our own making, because God doesn't have need for those things. But we put those up because sometimes we get afraid of what is behind that curtain. It's like playing that old game show, what's behind door number 1. Sometimes we don't want to know what is there, and so we'll put all sorts of other stuff in the way. God is reaching out even through those things, whether they're curtains or robust theologies of God or stereotypes or whatever it is that gets in the way. God is still reaching out for us. And it also means that in our darkest times of our lives, that is the one thing that won't ever disappear. That in fact, in those times, that's when God's love is all the more present. When everything else is falling apart and falling away, because it comes directly from God, it is always there, and it is always there and always present for us and grows stronger in our times of greatest need. Sometimes what we need is not God to show up as a big, white, flowing beard, Gandalf type character. Although because I'm kind of that smart alecky, snarky person, that would be the way God would show Himself to me, just because that would be what would get through my thick head probably, because that wouldn't be what I was expecting. Sometimes we need God to show up in the form of maybe an African American woman called Papa that we aren't expecting at all, or maybe to show up in the form of a hipstery-looking, Mediterranean-looking guy who sometimes walks on water. I love the actor that plays Jesus in the movie we'll watch this afternoon, because just is kind of what you expect, but kind of not what you expect, all at the same time. Or maybe sometimes we need God to show up in the form of a mystical acting Asian woman who is both there and sometimes disappears, just quite hard to pin down. But God shows up to us in ways that we need to hear. Not what we're expecting, but so that we can grow in that relationship, that we can come through the curtain and see more clearly who God is and what God is doing, not just in us, but in the people around us, and draw deeper into that relationship.